Awesome. I was just getting the recording going, trying to do too many things. Alrighty, I'm Paige, I'm an alcoholic, and welcome everyone. And my dog's just trying to make a little bed in the bed over there. So that's what that background noise is. All right, so where we're going to pick up today is right on page 20. And we're in the chapter, There is a Solution. And this is actually an incredibly exciting place to pick up because we are going to be diving into some incredibly vital step one information. Step one information that is just so important for us to understand. What is alcoholism? Am I an alcoholic? What does it mean to be an alcoholic? So welcome everyone. So where we're going to pick up is the third full paragraph. And what we're talking about is some points that point to the misunderstanding of what it means to be an alcoholic. And so what we're diving into is this idea of these common misconceptions about alcoholism. And we can ask ourselves, have I been told some of these things? Have I thought some of these things? Have I had experience with this? So let's dive in. How many times have people said to us, I can take it or leave it alone? Why can't he? Has anyone ever told you, why I can stop? Why can't you stop? You know, have we ever thought that? Have I ever looked at those silly normal jerks who have 3 drinks and go home with dry pants? Do you know what I mean? Can't relate to them, but have I ever been like, why can't I do that? And it says, why don't you drink like a gentleman? So our gentleman today is Raj, but everyone else, drink like a lady. Drink like a gentleman or quit. You know, why don't I just get it together or I give it up? Has anyone ever told me something like that? That fellow can't handle his liquor. Have I ever been told I can't handle my liquor? Why don't you try beer and wine? Lay off the hard stuff. And have I ever did that? Have I ever tried laying off the hard stuff? Sticking to beer, sticking to wine. I mean, it's got antioxidants. What could go wrong? You know what I'm saying? His willpower must be weak. Have I been told that? Have I thought that? Have I felt that? It says he could stop if he wanted to. Have I ever been told that? Have I ever felt that? You know, that Paige, you could stop if you want to. That shame. Or have I had it as a bit of a defense mechanism? I could stop if I want to. She's such a sweet girl. I think he'd stop for her sake. And I will say that at this point, it's real hard for me not to take off my alcoholic hat and put on my Al-Anon hat and be like, yeah, I am a sweet girl. He should stop for my sake. He didn't. And I was not a sweet girl. I was behind the dumpster. Alrighty. And it says the doctor told him that if he ever drank again, it would kill him. But there he is, all lit up again. Have I ever had a warning of a doctor, a psychologist, a therapist, a medical professional of any sort tell me, don't do it anymore. You've got to stop. You've got to stay stopped, only for me to do it again. And it goes on to say, now, these are commonplace observations on drinkers that we hear all the time. Back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. We see that these expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different than ours. Because what these comments, what these questions are all about is asking the alcoholic to do the impossible. And there are two things. There are 2 things that are impossible for an alcoholic to do every single time. The first thing that is impossible for me as an alcoholic, and I will summarize it in my little page way, is to drink like a lady every single time. You know what I'm saying? It is impossible for me to control the amount that I take every single time. Now, if you're here, you might be thinking, no, but Paige, there was some outstanding circumstances where I was able to just have 3 drinks, you know? Sound familiar? Right? But what is my experience? My experience is that more often than not, when I took a drink, that drink took me. And I could not control the amount that I take. And I would drink myself into pain, into suffering, into humiliation, and into degradation. And that does not even have to be external consequences. That can be the humiliation within myself, that pain deep within myself, that I'm living in a way that I know I don't want to. So the first thing that is asking an alcoholic to do, which is impossible, is to control the amount they drink once they start. But that is possible for non-alcoholics. Did you know that they can do that every single time? Every time. Did you know that they don't have to have strategies to try to do that? They don't have to lay off the hard stuff. They just have one. They don't have to try to eat, try to not eat, try to use some non-conference approved dry goods, do a little drugs to level it off. They just have 3 drinks. Every time. Wild. Can't relate, right? But their reaction is very different than mine. Now, the other thing that these non-alcoholics are asking us to do as alcoholics, which is humanly impossible, is to stay permanently sober. Quit for somebody else. And keep in mind, I don't care why I quit. Doesn't matter why I quit. I can quit for amazing reasons. My amazing reasons to stay sober cannot keep me sober. That idea that, man, I should just stop. I've had warnings. Here are some of the things that are humanly impossible to keep me sober. Self-knowledge, fear, consequences, pain, warnings, threats. None of it. Self-knowledge, willpower, desire, none of that can keep me sober. So these reactions are from people who have the ability to say, I will not drink again. And that has an effect. These are the people that get a prescription for antibiotics. And do you know what they do? They take their antibiotics and they don't drink on them. What? What a wild concept. I'll take a pill or two and then, I need a drink, so we're not finishing that round. You know what I'm saying? I am a doctor's nightmare. The doctor's opinion, the doctor's nightmare over here, But those are the people that if they have a reason to, they cannot drink. And I will stay sober. I will say I'm not going to drink and I will hold off for a while. Do you know what I'm saying? I will hold off until I can't anymore. Do you know what I'm saying? I'll try to put things between me and that first drink and none of it works. And so these are misunderstandings about alcoholism. And how often do we as alcoholics have misunderstandings about alcoholism? How often do we see a chronic relapser and think, man, they're just not done. They just don't want it enough. How often have we said, call before I drink? Man, I can't do that. If the obsession's on me, I don't have that power. When it's on me, I don't have that power. I have misunderstandings of alcoholism, and I'm an alcoholic. And so it's important for me to understand, what does it mean to be an alcoholic? Because when I see that, I see the hopelessness. I am beyond human aid. So it says, now these are commonplace observations on drinkers which we hear all the time. Back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. We see that these expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different from ours. Now what we're doing is we're getting into the 3 types of drinkers. And we can identify ourselves. So type 1 drinker. If you're hanging out with me on a Wednesday, I'm just going to cut to the chase. There's not a chance you're type 1. Absolutely not. There's other things for you to do. So moderate drinkers, type 1, moderate, have little trouble in giving up liquor entirely if they have a good reason for it. They can take it or leave it alone. Is that my experience? Is my experience that I can take it or leave it alone? Abso-frickin-lutely not. No. They're the people that finish their course of antibiotics. They're the people that get a medication that says, may cause drowsiness. So they think, wow, I shouldn't mix my alcohol with that. I'll stay off that. You know what I mean? Those people, if they've got a good reason, they don't need to drink. And they can moderate their drinking every single time. So I think that eliminated everyone. Sorry, guys, you're not there. That's not you. And then let's get into type 2. Then we have a certain type of hard drinker. So this is the hard drinker. I'll be honest, if you're here, you're probably not type 2 either. I know. If you're like me, you're like, no. I must be type 2. Because, like, girl, what you're offering me is inventory? Oh, no, I'm going to try to be type 2. I don't want to be this type 3 real deal alcoholic. So let's see type 2. Then we have a certain type of hard drinker. He may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. So there could be some physical and mental consequences. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. But here is the difference. If a sufficiently strong reason, so I can ask myself, have I had any sufficiently strong reasons to stop or moderate? And by the way, it's normal people's sufficiently strong reasons. Because I'll be honest, there ain't no reason good enough for me. And even if it is, it does not work. And so here are some examples of what a sufficiently strong reason is for a hard drinker. It says, ill health. Have I ever had physical consequences as the result of my drinking? Anyone here? Anyone here ever showed up with like broken bones, bruises, liver damage, concussions? Anyone here ever have any physical consequences as a result of their drinking? I want you to know a non-alcoholic will be like, that's not, I would not like that. I will stop or I will moderate. If the last time you had 2 tuna fish sandwiches, you ended up in the ICU, you'd probably cut it out. Maybe stick to one, Stick to one if you're me. I'm like trying to angle it, but you know what I mean? So if I had any experiences like this, falling in love, have I had any experiences where I had a loved one, I had a partner, I had somebody tell me, Paige, please stop drinking. Paige, please, your drinking is hurting me. Have I ever had that experience? And even if it's not falling in love, even if it's falling in lust, have I ever had those experiences? Even if it wasn't Mr. Right, it was Mr. Right now. Did I have good reasons to stay sober? A really common way, we got more women than men, so I'll mention it. A common way that women try to get sober is to have children. Have I ever had children? And has having children not been a sufficiently strong reason, which is to say, maybe you were able to make it the 9 months. Many of us can't. Maybe we were able to make it through breastfeeding. Many of us can't. But by the time we could drink, we were off and going again. You know what I'm saying? Does any of that sound familiar? Falling in love. Change of environment. Has anyone ever done the good old geographic? Tell you what, I don't know. There can't be any alcoholics in South Carolina. Let me go down there. I'll tell you, I found a couple, I guess. The actual geographic that I did, Liz is the only one that's going to remember or relate to this. I went down to Lethbridge. It's just windier, and I'm just as much a drunk. You know what I'm saying? Right? Have I ever tried changing environment? So that can be the geographic, but that can be moving locations, moving friend groups, moving jobs. Have I ever tried to change my external situations? And that not worked. And it says, so if warning of a doctor, has any medical professional, person with a degree told me to cut it out? And has that not worked? That is a sign that I'm not a type 3. I'm not a type 2. I am a type 3. So it says, becomes operative. So if any of these things happen, these sufficiently strong reasons happen, this man can also stop or moderate. Although he may find it difficult and troublesome and may even need medical attention. These are the people who just go to treatment and they do a round of treatment and then they're good. They get out of treatment and they can either moderate their drinking or they're good. They stop and they're great and they're living life and they, I don't know, take up fishing or some other hobby. I don't know what they do. You can't relate. I'm just white knuckling, wanting to die, living in depression and anxiety and hating myself until I can either kill myself or take a drink. But I think they go fishing. I don't know. Maybe they do macrame. Maybe that's what they do. But those are the people that get out of treatment and they are good. I'll be honest, I didn't go to treatment. But has anyone here ever gone to treatment, gotten out, and relapsed? That's a good indication that I might not be a type 2, that I might be a type 3. So let's dive in. Let's see what it means to be a real alcoholic. So it says, what about the real alcoholic? He may start off as a moderate drinker. So here's the thing, I'll work with people and they'll say, hey, Paige, back in 82, back in 94, back in 08, back in 2014, back in 2020, I was able to take it or leave it alone. So we might start off as a moderate drinker. Too bad. It's about where I am now. And it says he may or may not become a continuous hard drinker. And so I might have had some times where I was able to put, maybe a little bit of sobriety together. Maybe. But what is my current experience today? That's what we're looking at. Because the way I was drinking at 14, or, I had a sponsee one time and we diagnosed it for that at 9, she was a moderate drinker. At 9, it was moderate. 9! If we got to diagnose a 9-year-old's drinking, I'm just going to point something out. You know what I'm saying? And by the time she had hit 15, she had passed through hard drinker. And after 15, it was real deal. Do you know what I'm saying? But I can look back and there's something about us where we look for all the ways we're not this thing. So if I have experiences from my own life of where I was able to control it, probably at the first few years of my drinking, but today I've got no control and I'm trying to stay sober and I want to stay sober and I have to stay sober, but I can't stay sober. Spoilers, I'm an alcoholic. That's it. But there's some colorful language and delightful description, so we're gonna power through on this. So it says, he may start off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker, but at some stage of his drinking career, we're the only ones making a career out of it. You know what I'm saying? Everyone else, it's an after hours. Oh, it's a 9 to 5 for me. Ooh, working the midnight oil on my drinking. But at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. And you can make a little note that is the physical allergy. Is there an experience in my life where once I start, I lose control? Is that my current lived experience? Probably, you guys. It probably is, right? Because otherwise, why would you want to stop? Genuinely, why would you want to quit? If you could drink moderately, weird. Those weirdos having like 3 drinks and enjoying the rest of their night. Crazy. And so what we're looking at is that physical allergy. So it says, here is the fellow who has been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. Again, that physical allergy. He does absurd, incredible, tragic things while drinking. And incredible is in the nature of the scope. Not once while drinking did they think about giving me like a Nobel Prize. You know what I'm saying? So not incredible that way. We'll think Incredible Hulk, So in fact, it goes on to say he is a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And I don't know if you're familiar with the book, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. It is a beautiful, perfect metaphor for alcoholism. And I'm under the understanding, Howard's not here to correct me, so it's true until he makes it back. It's his son's birthday today. But the author, Scottish author, I always want to say doctor, he's not a doctor, it's Robert Louis Stevenson. And to my understanding, the story Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is an allegory for his alcoholism. And I grew up in Canada in the 90s. I think the show was on PBS, but I learned Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde through a show called Wishbone. It was a little Jack Russell Terrier that taught famous English literature. And so that's how I know my Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So again, if I'm a little off, don't blame me. Blame the Jack Russell Terrier. But the story of it is there is this scientist, Dr. Jekyll, and what he does is he creates this potion. And he takes this potion, and as he does, he turns into this Mr. Hyde. This Mr. Hyde, which is this beast, this monster who goes. And at first, I'm going to point something out. He takes this potion and oh, it feels good. He feels powerful. He feels amazing and strong. And he leaps out the window and he goes and he starts tearing apart the city, right? There's a complete difference between Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And in this story, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, I mean, we can look at it like, it's my experience that, man, once I start to drink, I turn into a Mr. Hyde. I'll tell you my experiences. I cross lines I said I would never cross. I do things I said I would never do. I betray trust I never wanted to betray. I break hearts I never wanted to break. I do things that are actually, I'll tell you when we get to antisocial, I'll tell you what I'm like. I am not a delightful person to be around, but that is not my problem. You see, the problem in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is not that Dr. Jekyll has a potion that turns him into Mr. Hyde. His real problem is that he cannot stop himself from taking the potion. Is that my experience? That I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that if I take the potion that is alcohol, what is going to happen for me is I will turn into this beast, this Mr. Hyde, this person that I do not want to be, and I will hurt those that I love. That is my real problem. Has that been my experience? And Robert Louis Stevenson is a Scottish author, because I have a couple sponsees in Scotland, but one of my Scottish sponsees, he took umbrage when I said English literature. He's like, Scottish literature is what that one is. And an interesting fact about Robert Louis Stevenson is his grandfather. I don't even think this will make it in AA trivia, but it's some trivia. You got it. But his grandfather designed every single lighthouse in Scotland. It was designed by his grandfather. And I love that beautiful tie-in. Because when I come to page 21, I need to identify myself as Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. But as the result of this course of action, I get to be the lighthouse. I think the lighthouse is a beautiful, perfect metaphor of who I am called to be. See, I can't run around and save people. I got to have my hand out. I got to reach out. I got to make the approach to them. But my responsibility to those that are in unsafe waters, to those that are near the rocks, to those that do not know how to have safe passage from the hopelessness of alcoholism to the hope of the solution of the spiritual awakening is I am called to shine that light. To be a demonstration of the light of a power beyond myself. I'm just going to say God's light. That's the word I use. That's what I'm called to do. That is who I am called to be. So I get to go from he's not a doctor, but somebody should give him a doctorate at this point because it'll make my life easier because I'm selfish and self-centered. But I got to go from that Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, Robert Louis Stevenson, to that place of being the lighthouse, to being the light, to letting it flow through me. All right. So it says he is seldom mildly intoxicated. But I want to point something out. That is not 24/7, 365. When drinking, am I rarely mildly intoxicated. And it goes on to say he is always more or less insanely drunk. The caveat to that is when drinking. Most of us here are not daily drinkers 24/7, 365. Most of us here have had periods of abstinence. So when drinking is my experience that more often than not, I'm insanely drunk. Is that my experience? If you are wondering, most people cannot relate to insanely drunk, even a little bit. they don't approach it. Actually, I have some, most of my family actually that is non-alcoholic, but my brother's ex-wife and her mother would often, when they moved, they would have drinks, and they would go to the local bar. And I remember it was like New Year's or something, and then them and a friend of theirs was drinking, and I'm sober, and I'm just watching them, and this is how we define things differently. Their reactions are very different than ours. They were saying, now they weren't saying, oh my goodness, but I'm going to use that language. My goodness, I am so inebriated right now. Not a slur to be heard. Do you know what I mean? Not a waddle in sight. Nobody tripped over anything. Nobody fell flat on their face. Like, do you know what I'm saying? I am so drunk right now. Girl, I heard every word that you said. No, you're not. Girl. And then they had this moonshine. It was this alcohol that was it had peaches in it. And they had drank it, together. And they had these alcohol, soaked peaches at the bottom. And did you know that they were fighting about it? Fighting about it. Now, I'm going to tell you how they were fighting about it, and this is going to blow your mind. They were saying, you have them. No, you have, I'm a little tipsy. No, you have them. That's not how I'm fighting about booze. Do you know what I'm saying? Well, I am seldom mildly intoxicated while drinking. When drinking, I'm more or less insanely drunk. So, his disposition while drinking resembles his normal nature but little. Who I am when I am sober is not the same person that I am when I'm drinking. There is something drastically different about who I am and how I show up to life. And I don't know about you, but I come to morning after filled with guilt and shame and remorse, and I am revolted at the things I've done. If I know what it's like to come to the morning after fueled with shame and self-hatred, it's a good indication that my nature when drinking is nothing like my nature when sober. Do you know what I'm saying? And it goes on to say, he may be one of the finest fellows in the world, yet let him drink for a day and he frequently becomes disgustingly and even dangerously antisocial. And I have this story, and I told this story one time when I was doing it was like a big book study, first half big book study, second half shares back. And we were at this part of the book, and I was telling this story. And normally in Alcoholics Anonymous, when you tell a little bit of a drinking story, you'll get some some nods. I'm just going to warn you, I didn't get nods. I got blank faces. So I'm going to tell this story, and it's okay if you don't relate, but this is what comes to mind to me. When it talks about frequently and dangerously antisocial. I had gone to the liquor store, and I had gotten a bottle of Axe Head. Now I'm sure a Canadian brand. I don't know if it exists. Think Colt 45. A glass bottle of malt liquor. 'Cause I'm classy, y'all. You know what I mean? Oh, pinkies up. And so I had gotten that. And then what I had done is I drank it. And in the parking lot of the liquor store. Just gonna throw that in there. And then what had happened is I was like, you know what I need to do? I need to hurt myself. And so I was smashing the glass bottle in the bag to get glass to cut myself as the liquor store owner's coming out to yell at me. I couldn't figure out what his problem was. I get it now. That didn't even take inventory. I see it. But nobody was like, oh, I relate. It was a lot of like, ugh. But that's who I am, that's who I am, a lady, And it says he is a positive genius for getting tight, that means drunk, at exactly the wrong moment, particularly when some important decision must be made or engagement kept. Can I relate to that? Do I know what it's like to get drunk at exactly the wrong moment? I have to stay sober. I want to stay sober. The charges will be dropped if I stay sober. If I just show up to the wedding, the reception, the baby shower, if I just show up sober, everything's going to be okay. My final exam, my job interview. I've had midterms and job interviews where I didn't make the job interview because I started drinking. Do I know what that's like? I get drunk at exactly the worst moment. And it says, he is often perfectly sensible and well-balanced concerning everything except liquor. So you might be like, Paige, no, I've got common sense. I've got degrees. I'm an important person, and I've got people that work under me. Not me, I'm not important in that way. I know as immediately as I said that, I'm like, no, people are going to be like, you're important. I didn't mean it like that. But I'm not climbing no corporate ladder, you know what I'm saying? That I can have external success. And my external success does not preclude me from alcoholism. So I can be often perfectly sensible and well-balanced concerning everything except liquor. But in that respect, he is incredibly dishonest and selfish. Has that been my experience? And I want to point something out. If I have got to lie about my drinking, if I have got to sneak my drinks, if I have got to pretend I wasn't drinking, if I got to hide my drinking, if I've got to hide bottles, what that means is I'm not drinking like a normal person. Because a non-alcoholic does not need to hide it, does not need to lie about it, does not need to pretend it's not a problem. But also, if I'm incredibly selfish in regards to my drinking, what does that mean? What that means? Most normal people would not do the things that we would do to get a drink. Most normal people would not cross those lines that we cross to get a drink. Most normal people would not experience what we experience to go get a drink. They prioritize everything else. But I don't know about you. I need that drink. I need that drink. Has that been my experience? Do I know what it's like to want to show up, to be that good person, and I can't show up to be that person that I need to be? So it goes on to say he often possesses special abilities, skills, and aptitudes, and has a promising career ahead of him. This is where it lost me. But alcoholism can affect the most gifted, the most talented. Has my experience been that maybe I had some success in life? And it says he uses his gifts to build up a bright outlook for his family and himself, then pulls the structure down on his head by a senseless series of sprees. Do I know what it's like to pull myself out of the gutter and to build it up again, to rebuild the job, to rebuild the family, to rebuild, and to get drunk and tear it down and rebuild and rebuild and rebuild and rebuild and rebuild and get drunk and tear it down? Do I know what that's like? Right? And it says he is the fellow who goes to bed so intoxicated he ought to sleep the clock around. Yet early the next morning, he searches madly for the bottle he misplaced the night before. Do I know what that's like? Where I'm drinking longer, drinking more, drinking into the morning. Have I experienced that? And it says, if he can afford it, he may have liquor concealed all over his house to be certain no one gets his entire supply away from him to throw down the waste pipe. Have I had to hide it? Have I had to have hiding places? Has that been my experience? And it says, as matters grow worse, he begins to use a combination of high-powered sedative and liquor to quiet his nerves so he can get to work. Was I trying medication? Was I abusing medication? Was I mixing my alcohol with drugs? Was I using a little bit of stimulants to help with the hangover, the stimulants so I could drink how I wanted? Was I taking depressants? Was I taking things like benzos to take the edge off so I wouldn't have to drink so much? Do you know what I mean? Can I relate to adding these alcoholic enhancers to the mix? Can I relate to that? So as matters grow, and keep in mind that high-powered sedative, that's oftentimes that's given to withdraw off of alcohol. But it says as matters grow worse, he begins to use a combination of high-powered sedative and liquor to quiet his nerves so he can get to work. Then comes the day he simply cannot make it and gets drunk all over again. Perhaps he goes to a doctor who gives him morphine or some sedative with which to taper off. He then begins to appear at hospitals and sanitariums, emergency rooms, psychiatric wards, psychiatric facilities, detoxes, rehabs, sober living. Have I begun to go from there and there and there? And so and you'll notice that there's a progression. when we start with the real alcoholic, we talk about an inability to control. And now at the end of the first paragraph on page 22, what we are seeing is some of the consequences. And so if you're like, I didn't go to rehab. I didn't go to rehab. And if you're like, I didn't go to rehab, or maybe you're somebody that didn't try any of these alcoholic enhancers. Ooh, let me tell you, they would enhance, and they enhanced me straight to the bottom, you know. I joke about, thank goodness for crack, because it got me here pretty quick, you know. It enhanced. Like a lady, pinkies up, you know what I'm saying? But do I know what that's like? But if not, do I know what it's like to not have the ability to control? Do I know what it's like to be somebody I don't want to be when I'm drinking? Do I know what it's like to cross lines, to cross boundaries when I'm drinking? Is that my experience? Because if it's not my experience yet with other substances, with the hospitals, the sanitariums, the psych wards, the rehabs, it will be soon. If I have this thing, I'm going to get there. So it says, this is by no means a comprehensive picture of the true alcoholic, as our behavior patterns vary. But this description should identify him roughly. I always want to throw out, do you feel roughly identified? If you're wondering what that feels like, a little offended and called out. Like, oh, yeah, that's me, rude. You know what I mean? That's what we're after, you know? Is this kind of describing some of my behavior patterns? And to keep it very simple, what are the behavior patterns of an alcoholic? Once I start to drink, I cannot control the amount that I take every single time. And when I've wanted to stay sober, inevitably I've taken another drink. Does that identify you roughly? Sound familiar? You know? And so it says, why does he behave like this? If hundreds of experiences have shown him that one drink means another debacle with all its attendant suffering and humiliation, why is it he takes that one drink? Why can't he stay on the water wagon? What has become of the common sense and willpower that he still sometimes displays with respect to other matters? And it's the question of why? Perhaps there will never be a full answer to these questions. Opinions vary considerably as to why the alcoholic reacts differently from normal people. We are not sure why. Once a certain point is reached, little can be done for him. We cannot answer the riddle. And I want to talk with you about that why. Because oftentimes we come to Alcoholics Anonymous and we want to find out, why am I an alcoholic? Because I think if I figure out why I'm an alcoholic, that means I can go back and fix it somehow and I don't have to be an alcoholic. And that's just not the case. Do you know what I mean? It's just not the case. And there's this beautiful metaphor. To be an alcoholic is to be lost in the desert. And to be absolutely lost. Like to be going around in circles, not having landmarks, not knowing where you are. And I don't know about you, but we can tell with this complexion, I am not doing well in direct sunlight. This is not going well. I'm not having a good time. I'm here for the heat, but it's gonna burn, you know? And imagine, you know, I'm lost and I've began to run out of water. I've began to run out of food. And you know, an interesting thing about the desert, as hot as it is during the day, is as cold as it gets at night. And there begins to have that evening settle in, and that chill is in the air. And at that moment, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, I will not survive that long night in the desert. And by some miracle of miracles, I'm given a map. And that's what this thing is. My friend Terry, he talks about, this is not the treasure. This is the map. But I am given a map. And in this moment, it's far more relevant and far more important that I use this map to get my butt out of the desert to safety than I figure out how I got there in the first place. And if you know this about me, you know it would be quite the puzzle as to how I got there, because I'm not doing well on sand. The wheels are not rolling well on that. So how did I get there? It's a mystery. Does not matter. It's getting me out. But I want to share with you my experience. Because if you're still here, why? No, Paige, I want to know why. And I do promise why does not matter, but I'll share with you my experience. The reason why I'm an alcoholic. It has nothing to do with my family of origin, in my experience. I'm telling you about me. I'm not telling you about you. I'm telling you about my why, not yours. It has nothing to do with my family of origin. It has nothing to do with my childhood. It has nothing to do with my genetic makeup. It is not, and I've had some stuff happen. It has nothing to do with some of the traumatic stuff that has happened to me. I'm just talking about me. I'm not talking about you. It has nothing to do with me being a Canadian, not getting enough vitamin D or something because, it's some long winters, It has nothing to do with that. I'll tell you how I came to the experience of my why. I cannot tell you yours, but I can tell you mine, and I can tell you how I got there. You see, I came with all that stuff. I came with all that pain. I came with all that suffering. And you know what I would do? Is I would come to the practical program of action of these 12 steps. And I would begin to write down some of the stuff that had happened. Some of the stuff that I had gone through. Some of the depth of my pain, the depth of my shame in that 4th step. And I would write it down. And I would begin to get freedom from it. I would share that with God and another human being in that 5th step. And I would come to feel that I'm not so alone. And you know what would happen is I would go out from there at quiet hours 6 and 7, and I would experience a little bit of freedom, a little bit of relief, a little bit of ease. And then what I would do is I would go out and I would make my amends, and that guilt and that shame would fall from me. And I would go and I would continue this way of life, and I would pray and I would meditate. I would continue with inventory. But the answer to my why has nothing to do with my trauma, nothing to do with my family of origin. The answer to my why came as I sat down with other alcoholics, eyeball to eyeball, knee to knee, screen to screen. And I began to work with them. And I began to say, yes, me too. Yes, me too, I drank like that. Yes, me too, I went through that. Yes, me too, that happened to me. Yes, me too, I experienced that. Yes, me too. And here's how I got freedom from it. That's why I'm an alcoholic. Because God needed some alcoholics to go out to that desert and save those drunks out in the desert that were dying of this thing. That is why I'm an alcoholic. I cannot answer your why, but I can share with you the answer that I found. And I hope that you get to find one that I found, and I only found it as the result of this work. That is why. That has given my life meaning and purpose beyond anything I could have imagined. And if I was stuck looking for the origin of it, I would have missed the destination. If I was stuck looking for the origin, I would have missed the journey. I would have missed the hope. I would have missed the freedom. I would have been stuck in that desert, dying. So I got to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools and dive right in. So it says, we know that while the alcoholic keeps away from drink as he may do for months or years. So this is the alcoholic, months or years. I can have months of sobriety. I can have years of sobriety. That does not prevent me from being an alcoholic. Because if you're here and you're alcoholic and you're having that voice of the mental obsession that's like, no, Paige, I stayed sober 3 months. No, Paige, I made it 9 months. No, Paige, there was a time in my 20s I stayed sober 5 years. No, Paige. We know that while the alcoholic keeps away from drink as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men. We are equally positive that once he takes any alcohol, whatever, into his system, so we're beginning to talk about the physical allergy, because the physical allergy is what sets off once I take that drink. So we're equally positive that once he takes any alcohol, whatever, into his system, something happens both in the bodily and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm that. This is that my experience. That once I take that drink, off I go. And more often than not, I cannot stop. Does my experience, I can hold my experience up to the light. Does my experience match what it's saying here? That once I start, more often than not, I'm gone. And it says these observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. This next line is important. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body. We are talking about the mental obsession. here's my experience. I am allergic to onions and peppers, which means I'm not a lot of fun. And I don't get to go to Chipotle. I don't know if we have Chipotle even in Canada, but I don't get to go. Chipotle is not for me. But my problem, as somebody who is allergic, bless you. I know I catch those things. As somebody who is allergic to onions and peppers, my problem is onions and peppers. And how I solve that problem, how I solve that allergy to onions and peppers, is I do not take onions and peppers. I just don't have them. That is my solution. And that is a sufficient solution. That works. I also have an allergic reaction to alcohol. Once I start to drink, it sets off inside of me this phenomenon of craving where I need more. And the consequences are far worse than onions and peppers. Far worse. Far worse. And I spend just as much time in the bathroom. But far worse. And I say that is it. I'm never going to drink again. And it has no effect. So my real problem as an alcoholic is not my physical allergy. We've got to diagnose it. We've got to see that I have it. But my real problem as an alcoholic is that I have the obsession of the mind. My real problem as an alcoholic is I have a thought that takes me back to the first drink, despite the fact that it is ruining my life. And what we're looking at here in this paragraph is the mental obsession. So my main problem is that I'm going to drink again. That's the mental obsession. I am going to drink again. When I am as sober as I am today, but my illness is untreated, I get a thought. And that thought looks something like, this time will be different. Nobody will ever know. I'll go out for 3 drinks. My problem was drinking with Canadians, but I'm gonna drink with Americans in South Carolina. It'll be different this time. You know what I'm saying? It looks like F this, F that, F you. I just need some relief. It looks like if you're feeling the way I was feeling, you'd have to take a drink too. It looks like I'm gonna kill myself anyway, so why don't I get drunk? And I take that drink. And that is my problem. And if I have that problem, what that means is that I will drink again. And that is what we're trying to get us to see in the first step. That is the hopelessness and futility of my alcoholism. So it goes on to say, if you ask him why he started on the last bender, the chances are he will offer you one of 100 alibis. Sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking bout creates. So if you ask, Paige, why did you relapse? I can give you some reasons. I can give you some things that maybe sound plausible. Oh, you're going through a breakup, or oh, this was stressful, or oh, this was happening. But if you look at the wreckage of my life that happens as the result of the spree, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And oftentimes when people come back from a relapse, we want to ask what happened. It is important for me to understand that when somebody relapses, it is not what happened. What happened was inevitable. It is inevitable for somebody like me to drink again. It is what didn't happen. And what didn't happen was the course of action, the 12 steps to produce a spiritual awakening. It really is that simple. I'm like, really, it's that. It's not like, was the wind blowing from a northwesterly direction a little too strong? Or did I miss a reading of the daily reflections, or I didn't make my bed? None of those things will keep you sober, by the way. It's good if you want to make your bed. I don't. That's just me being transparent. I'm not that fancy. It's a good practice to get into. Will not keep me sober. Nothing less than a spiritual awakening can keep me sober. So I might have some excuses. I might have some things that sound plausible. But in the light of the pain, the suffering, the humiliation of the morning after, it does not make sense. And it says they sound like the philosophy of the man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so he can't feel the ache. I spent a lot of time thinking I was different. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous thinking I'm not like you. I'm not as bad as you. This thing couldn't apply to me. I'm different, and here's how. But that was a line that got me pretty quickly. The thing that I am using to relieve my pain is making my pain worse, and I cannot stop it. Does that make sense? Does that make sense experientially? The thing that is ruining my life is this exact same thing that I'm using to alleviate the pain of my life being ruined. And it goes on and on and on. And so what do we got to do in Alcoholics Anonymous? In Alcoholics Anonymous, what we are going to do is we are going to treat the headache. That's what we're going to do. We're going to treat the headache. And if the headache is treated, then I don't need to pick up the hammer. And I don't need to take that first drink. And the headache is not limited to alcoholics. The headache is the spiritual malady. That pain, that suffering, that loneliness, that depression, that anxiety that I feel when I am sober. And how I am going to treat the spiritual malady is with the spiritual awakening. And when I do that, I am not in that pain. And when I'm not in pain, I do not think to pick up the hammer. The mental obsession is gone. And if I don't hit my head on the head with the hammer, there will be no headache. Do you get what I'm saying? So we treat the spiritual malady, and how we diagnose alcoholism is the physical allergy and mental obsession. If I treat the spiritual malady, the mental obsession goes. And if the mental obsession goes, I won't take that drink. If I don't take that drink, I won't set off the phenomenon of craving. And that's what we're doing here. Just if that's helpful. So it says, if you draw this fallacious, that means false, reasoning to the attention of an alcoholic, he will laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk. Once in a while, he may tell the truth. And by the way, does that sound familiar? Somebody calling us out on our drinking, calling us out on like, it is insane that I would drink again. And I'm like, or I get walls up, I get shut down. Don't tell me. I get defensive, I get reactive. I'm not here for it, you know? Once in a while, he may tell the truth. And the truth, this is the truth. Strange to say is he usually has no more idea why he took that first drink than you have. I don't know why. Why would I do it? Some drinkers have excuses with which they are satisfied part of the time. But in their hearts, they really do not know why they do it. Once this malady is just a word for sickness. Once the sickness has a real hold, they are a baffled lot. To be baffled is I don't know how to get out of here. I'm lost in the desert. I don't know how to get out. So once this malady has a real hold, they are a baffled lot. There is the obsession, and this is the mental obsession. The obsession that somehow, someday they will beat the game. No, somehow, some way, I'm going to figure out a way that I can stay sober, that I can do this, or I can drink responsibly. I don't got to do all that you got to, I can figure it out. Right? But in their hearts, they really, but it says, there's the obsession that somehow, someday they will beat the game, but they often suspect they're down for the count. And down for the count is a boxing metaphor. There's a couple boxing metaphors in the book. And to be down for the count is to be knocked out. You get punched out, you're lying flat on your back on the mat, and the referee is counting to 10? 10 or 11? I felt like it was 10, but then I'm like, I don't know. It's counting to 10, and you have 10 seconds to get up. But down for the count, KO'd. You're done. The fight's over. And that's what we got to get to in step 1, where I see that I'm flat on my back. There is no more fight in me. This thing has got me. I've got nothing I can put between me and the first drink. Alcoholism has me. I'm done. And come to the end of myself. My little plans, my designs, my jukes and jives and I did jabs and uppercuts. I was like running out of boxing thing, and I don't think jive is a boxing metaphor, but I know they're quick on their feet, right? And it says how true this is, few realize. In a vague way, their families and friends sense that these drinkers are abnormal. But everybody hopefully awaits the day when the sufferer will rouse himself from his lethargy and assert his power of will, which is to say that, like, give your head a shake, Pull it together. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps. And you know what an interesting thing about the expression pull yourself up by, to pull oneself up by its bootstraps? It is physically impossible. And that expression was actually used, originally coined, to describe something that was physically impossible. Just imagine, you can't pull yourself up based on the straps of your boots. There's not enough, you can't do it. Also, because I have a degree in network communications management that I do not want to use, but I had to spend $40,000 in paying off student loans, you're getting this fun fact whether you want it or not. When you boot up your computer, it's referenced the bootstrap system, which is in reference to that idiom. So when you boot it up, that's why it's called booting up, because it's turning on by its bootstraps. But we can't turn ourselves over based on our bootstraps. We can't pull ourselves up. We've tried. All the ways that I've tried to assert my willpower, pull myself up by my bootstraps, it has not worked. One more paragraph and then I'm wrapping us up. Don't you worry, I got the time. The tragic truth is that if the man be a real alcoholic, the happy day may not arrive. Human power, willpower, is not sufficient. He has lost control. At a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. That's the mental obsession. The most powerful desire to stay sober carries no weight. And this tragic situation has already arrived practically in every case long before it is suspected. And so we'll leave it there and we'll pick up there next week. And it's over to Vivian.